So these days we have the iPad Air, the iPad Pro, we have the MacBook Air, and the two new types of MacBook Pros. And it can be really difficult to figure out which one do you actually need, a laptop or a tablet-like device. There are so many questions to answer. Whether the Mac is actually worth the price, is the tablet option gonna be a cheaper option and well worth it despite all the things that you may not have access to? And the debate has been going on for years and years. While MacBooks are a great fit for most students that are out there, the iPad is just becoming the new staple device that you see students carrying around everywhere. And so by the end of this video, I wanna give you a pretty definitive answer about which one is right for you, depending on your circumstances and what type of student you are. Hey guys, Arch here, a second-year medical student, and on this channel we focus on learning how to learn so we can spend more time on the things and people that matter the most to us. This debate has been going on for years and years, so I thought that I'd add my sort of thoughts on this and who I think the iPad is for, as well as the MacBook, and how you can kind of put these together in your workflow depending on what type of student you are. So firstly, I'm gonna go through why I'm considering Apple for both of this. And yes, it might be that I'm an Apple fanboy, but I think there's some things important to mention here about why I go for Apple. Then we'll look at why the iPad might be the option that you're looking at and things to consider about getting this. And then as well, the same for the MacBook. And then at the end, we'll look at which one is right for you. Now, why Apple? There can be many reasons, but one of the things that I think is one of the biggest reasons that I stick to Apple all of the time is that the ecosystem is just great. So with this ecosystem, I think it's set up quite well to allow for people to be more productive, especially because a lot of it doesn't have to be set up on your own, and there's a great suite of apps that are just so easy to set up. Whereas on Windows, it's a little bit harder sometimes to get these things set up. I have no doubts that you can do more probably on Windows, but that ease of access is actually quite important. Now, if you're a productivity enthusiast yourself, you might understand where I'm coming from when I mentioned that I love keyboard shortcuts and all of the other micro efficiencies that you can get by setting something up on your Mac. And that seems to just be a lot easier sometimes with some of the applications that are very easily available on Mac compared to Windows. And so the ecosystem also gives you great integration. Things like AirDrop. It's just so useful when you have devices that are in the Apple ecosystem. I haven't yet heard of someone on the street who's using an AirDrop equivalent on Windows or Android or something like that, even still. And although we don't think of Apple as kind of like the technological giant that is always innovating on new stuff, they're usually copying things from, Android, let's say, but with the Macs, they have been able to be innovative in that with the new CPUs, the M1 chips and such. They are producing some of the most powerful CPUs put into laptops in a very, very long time. And with all of these devices that I've had, they've always had such a good reliability. They have lasted for a very long time, and the battery is usually really, really good, and I've had no issues with that. Now, when we are thinking about Apple, obviously one of the caveats is price, and it is quite an investment, but since I spend so much time on these devices, that's what's kind of made it worth it for me. Doesn't mean it's gonna be worth it for everyone, but that's just something that I thought I'd mention. Okay, so what are the specific things that make the iPad worth it for some students that are out there? It goes without saying that portability is one of those things. This is particularly why I actually prefer the 11-inch version over the 12.9. It can be quite, hard to carry around sometimes, and I think it's just an easier and much lighter thing carrying something like this, which essentially can turn into an A4 piece of paper. Essentially how that works is instead of writing on it in a portrait mode, you put it on landscape, and it's the same width of an A4 piece of paper. It's a little bit more, but it doesn't really matter that much. Now, this has become a sort of staple with students nowadays where, every medical student has to have an iPad. You have to have an iPad to be efficient and productive, all of these sorts of things, but that's not true. The iPad is just a convenience factor, and that's all it really is. It's just a tool in your toolkit to help you become more efficient. But this is not going to change much if you're not changing your behaviors and attitudes when you're using this device. I know so many people who are extremely efficient and high achievers themselves who have never even been a sort of tech person, because you don't need to be. And so, you know, that's just something that I want you guys to consider. And I mean, one of the great things just about the iPad in general is just that convenience in being able to go to, you know, I guess laptop mode all the way to being able to play with it, and then using an Apple Pencil as well to draw on it. There is quite a lot of strong research on the fact that writing and sketching and drawing, you know, doing that sort of stuff for your notes is going to be more conducive for deeper learning than typing it. Even though you get efficiency boosts and you can write more stuff on a computer, that is not going to lead to as much learning that you can get by learning proper techniques when you're actually going about sketching your notes. Another thing that I want to mention is that, you know, an iPad does have a camera, and that is on the back side. And that can be quite useful as well, because if you pull out your phone in class or something like that, it usually looks like that you're not being productive or doing something for work. And so if you pull out your iPad, it's pretty professional, you know, it looks like you're doing the right thing, and it's just something that, you know, I notice as well. But that shouldn't really sway decision anyway, but I think it's useful to know, you know, when you're PDF scanning and not making your teacher annoyed with you by pulling out your phone during class. Now, the last thing that I do want to mention is the iPad is actually touchscreen, whereas the Mac is not. And I've heard some rumors about this, and I'm not really sure of the real reason, but I think it's something to do with them wanting to separate the iPad line of products from the MacBook. Hopefully they will add touchscreen to the MacBook, but it is what it is. There's not much that we can change about it. We can just hope in the future, but we're still looking at, you know, the lineup that we have right now with the Macs and iPad and seeing if we can make a decision based on that. So what is actually really important to consider about the MacBook and choosing this instead of getting an iPad, which is a more, you know, innovative and I guess newer device in some ways, because it's incorporating some new ways of using technology. Now, I know this is a 2013 MacBook Pro. I'm actually using my other one right now to record this video, but just, you know, think about the new MacBooks that are out there as I talk about this. So one of the things that I mentioned at the very start of this video is that you can have those micro efficiencies using lots of keyboard shortcuts, because there's a lot of customization when it comes to the MacBook versus the iPad. And although the iPad Pro is as powerful as some of the MacBooks out there, having a laptop just makes a difference in how the operating system works. So for example, Photoshop on a laptop still feels a lot better than doing it on an iPad. You know, something that people really admire about having a laptop is that you actually get ports. You know, on the iPad, you only have one, and usually you just use that for charging. Yeah, you can put an external drive there if you want, but it's not something that you would do normally with an iPad. You'd use something like AirDrop, let's say. So one of the things with the MacBook is with all of that extra customization, it's easy to set up the Mac in the way that you think works best for your workflow. And again, if you're a productivity enthusiast, that's important to you. But from a learning perspective, the laptop doesn't really do much in that regard, but it just makes it easy for you to be able to, you know, get around places and do things for your study, whether it be writing an assignment or, you know, going to read a textbook or something online. It's more so about this being a workstation, something that you can use to do some more complicated work than what you may just do on an iPad. So if you're a student who just has bare bones stuff, including writing assignments, writing notes, maybe watching Netflix and going on the internet sometimes, then the iPad by all means is something for you. However, any more and you might want to consider about having a laptop there just in case. There's times every now and then where a certain app requires a laptop and it can't actually be run on an iPad. Other things that are pretty important as well is, again, the screen real estate. If you're doing an assignment, that really matters. And I highly recommend getting a second monitor if that's something you can afford to do as well, especially because you can get rid of that cognitive switching penalty. Going from your assignment to the internet, you can do that seamlessly with 2 monitors set up at the same time. Well, it doesn't have to be 2 monitors, it can just be your laptop and a monitor connected as well. Now, a really cool thing is if you have both the MacBook and the iPad, you can set up this thing called Sidecar, or you can use an app called Duet. And this allows you to share the screens and kind of use them together as one device. This is extremely useful when studying on the go. However, that does require you to have both devices. Now, one of the quick ways that I get around on the iPad is through using Spotlight. And I do that because, you know, moving around with a keyboard is usually quicker than clicking things and using your mouse, if you get really good at it. Now, if you're on a laptop, getting something like Alfred, which is basically Spotlight on steroids, can be extremely useful in making you more productive. This is possible because you can set up macros and certain shortcuts for the tasks that you do quite often all of the time. However, one of the main limitations with the MacBooks nowadays is that they are so pricey. And in fact, it just makes it something that's not very feasible for a lot of students. However, if it is feasible for you, you gotta make sure that you're making the right choice here, since it is a lot of money. Obviously, this doesn't allow you to handwrite notes or draw or anything like that. So yeah, if you're just a student, it's, you know, basically a typing device, which you can do on an iPad. So which one is best for you? And I want to go through some specific student profiles here. The first one here is that you're the most basic student. You write some notes, you write some assignments, you go on the internet, and you might watch some YouTube. If this is you, then the iPad is more than fine. In fact, you might want to go with the 12.9 inch if that's a possibility for you, because you get that bigger screen real estate when you might need it for writing assignments. Now, if you're a student who is a little bit more techie, then you are probably going to need a laptop for who you kind of are. But one of the key things that I think is important to consider when getting an iPad is, do you have a laptop that works well and will work well for a few years? This is extremely important because there still may be odd cases where you do need a laptop. And if you don't have a laptop, then what are you gonna do? You're gonna have to borrow it from someone else, let's say. So as long as you have a laptop that's living and not really annoying to use, then having the iPad as your main driver, your main device, is more than fine. Now, another thing to consider is that if you are looking at the iPad and it looks pretty cheap to you, you have to consider that you probably also need to buy the Apple Pencil and the keyboard with it. Now, when you consider all of that, it can actually be quite similarly priced to some entry-level MacBooks out there. It's really about trying this out, and one of the great things is that Apple does give you that 14-day return policy to test it out and see how it goes for you. And during, you know, holiday times, which it is now, depending on what country you're in and such, they are giving, you know, extended return policies as well. So the iPad gives you slightly reduced efficiency, but you're getting that portability and that convenience there. Whereas the MacBook is a little bit more bulky and, you know, more traditional, but you are able to get a little bit more productivity out of it if you're spending a lot of time studying and doing stuff that needs a device. So you have to decide what's really ultimately more important for you. Is it the efficiency that comes with having a device like a laptop, or is it the convenience and portability that comes with an iPad? One of the main things to make this decision easier is, how techie are you? Usually if you're more techie, you'd probably like to go with a laptop. If not, you're thinking about the iPad. Anyway, again, I believe you need to have a good laptop first before you consider the iPad. You know, paper is more than fine. This is a convenience thing. But other than that, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.